Hey everybody, welcome to Sell Yeah. This is the 8-Fig podcast segment that features some of our highly valued partners and sometimes seller customers to help spread the good word about what they're doing in e-commerce and entrepreneurship to make for a better ecosystem for us all. I'm Sam Bell. I'm the partnership manager at 8-Fig and your host as always, here with a very, very special guest today. Really, really excited to have you, Lyn. Lyn has a really impressive background being the chief storyteller, which we're going to hear more about at Share Snacks. Check them out, as well as a list of other accolades that I'm not even going to pretend I tried to memorize. So I'm just going to go ahead and read them off, and then he'll give you a little bit more of an introduction as to who he is and what he's all about and storytelling and all that. So I'm really excited to have you, Lyn. Thanks again for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course. So Lyn currently is the chief story officer at Share Snacks, founder of Storytelling for Entrepreneurs and author of the best-selling book, Start with Story. Go check it out. He has filmed over 1,000 entrepreneurs, including the founders of Starbucks, Whole Foods, Tom's, and LinkedIn. Very impressive. He co-created and produced CNBC's first primetime TV series, American Made, and has produced 1,200 videos for entities such as Entrepreneur Magazine, Microsoft, Dell, and Nestle. Lyn founded 8 companies and has raised $10 million in venture funding. That's pretty awesome. And serves or has served on advisory boards for South by Southwest, Dell, and Empowering a Billion Women. Lyn has given over 50 keynote presentations on entrepreneurial and business storytelling at entities such as HP, Dell, Ernst & Young, EO, South by Southwest, Wharton School of Business, and the University of Texas. Welcome. He is also a mentor at the SKU Consumer Packaged Goods Accelerator, Founding Institute at Startup Accelerator, and EBW Women Executive Accelerator. Lyn has a BA in electrical engineering. I didn't know that. That's pretty awesome. And an MBA in marketing and entrepreneurship, and loves trail running and honking at cows on road trips, as we just discussed. We're gonna dive into that a little bit more. Again, Lyn, really excited to have you on. That is a long list of accolades and a very, very rich background.
Yeah, it's something. There's a lot going on there.
No, but when I was reading that earlier, I was really excited to have you on because I knew this was going to be a good one. You have a very rich background in entrepreneurship, in storytelling, in e-commerce. I'd love to just hear from your perspective. I could read it on a page all day, but from your perspective, what led you down this path, and what does it mean to be like a chief storytelling officer, and how does that kind of culminate to what you're doing now?
By and large, it centers on my desire to be an entrepreneur. I mean, I didn't even necessarily know what the word was when I became one. It was just I had started out as an engineer, decided that wasn't the career path for me, quit, started teaching skiing because that's what you do. You just decided before, and I'm like, I'm going to go to grad school and get an MBA. But before that, I'm going to do something just kind of crazy. And so I started teaching skiing. And it was a lot of fun. It was a blast. It was a 1 year turned into a couple years, lived in my car and all that. But one of the most kind of personal introspective discovery elements that happen is you have this time to sit with people on lifts. And that can be 15, 20, sometimes 30 minutes, in addition to spending time with them for an hour or 2 hours or an all-day lesson. And the most fascinating people were these business owners. They worked hard, man. But they would come up and they were so excited about whatever it is what they're doing. You can imagine the spectrum of industries and businesses and individuals. And I just kind of caught the bug. And when I was looking at grad schools, I kind of decided to shift to look for programs that had a great entrepreneurship track. And there was a number of schools, but the University of Texas is what I fell in love with because of Austin. Great program, great entrepreneurship track, and a lot of startups in the community that I can kind of learn from. And it was that kind of, I didn't start out, I started working for American Airlines and then in Sabre, and then eventually found my way into a startup. I was employee number 7, first time I'd ever had a key to a business in my life after working as an engineer and as an MBA. And it was fascinating. I loved it. And then my best friend, Ingrid was her name, she approached me. She goes, hey, I want to do this startup where we've got this access to artificial intelligence and I want to help companies do big things with it. We didn't know what that meant. I'm like, sure, I'll help you. So I quit the job I was doing and started working with her. And it was an amazing ride. It was truly one of those exhilarating struggles with roller coaster ups and downs. You're screaming because you're excited, or you're screaming because it just went off the tracks flying. And we had a tremendous amount of success in the early stages, and we raised $7 million for that. And we were on the cover of Wall Street Journal, New York Times, a variety of regional papers. And then all of a sudden the dot-com crash happened, and we got caught up in it because all of our customers were e-commerce companies, and we lost 6 of our 7 customers at the time.
Wow.
Within 2 months. They all just, boom, shut down their operations. We were still venture-backed going after our 3rd round, so we didn't have enough money, and we had to let 32 people go and shut the company down. So then we made the paper for the opposite reasons. USA Today and other papers about this crash and burn scenario. And it was a long-winded way of saying, I just kind of I still decided to pursue becoming an entrepreneur. And I started writing business plans and helping entrepreneurs. And then I did another business and it was okay. And then I did another one that had a decent little exit. And I was kind of figuring out what I was going to do next. And my best friend, Ingrid, again, she comes to me and she goes, I want to do this TV show about women entrepreneurs raising capital in Texas in the high-tech sector. And I'm like, okay, I don't know anything about television. I don't know about video or production, but I'll help you. And I knew what she meant. She was talking about how, this is the late 1990s, early 2000s, a very chauvinistic type of,
sure.
We're in Texas, right? And high tech was 90% males. And we'd be in meetings, her and myself. She was the CEO and marketing for our previous company. And the guys that were around the table would look at me when she was talking. And I was like, oh my God. And I would have to look at her so they would look at her. So I understood what she wanted to do. She wanted to capture the challenge that women face. Mm-hmm. And this is a long-winded way of getting to how I got in the storytelling path, right?
Yeah. No, keep going. This is awesome.
So what happened in that sense is that I didn't know anything about television or making a TV show. And she's like, I want to do this. I want to pitch to the networks and we're going to make it happen. Ingrid will bust through. She'll make anything happen. So I started helping her. 5 hours a week turned into 10 hours a week, turned into 15 hours a week. And we got this project with the University of Texas. It was a paid project to film a legacy piece of her mentor, Dr. George Kosmetsky. And the business school had been named after him. He was one of the first billionaires in Texas, 2 PhDs, incredibly brilliant, just kind of one of the stalwarts of technology and entrepreneurship in the state of Texas and across the country because of everything that he had done. And I was like, oh crap, we're going to get paid. I'm going to have to figure how to make this, a short little documentary on him and everything else. And I met this guy who used to be a director for the show Dynasty in Dallas. This is an 80s and 90s show. I met him through a leadership Austin class. And I said, Dwight, will you help me? And he goes, sure. So he's got the ponytail, the glasses. He had his own director's chair, everything. So I learned from that guy. So I asked him to help. And we were filming this piece. Now, mind you, this is Ingrid talking with her mentor, Dr. Kosmetsky, the billionaire entrepreneur. And it was a legacy piece on him. So she's asking him questions about, who he was and where he got started, and all these kind of traditional questions you might think that he would share. And he says, during the interview, he says, Ingrid, to get a perspective on my legacy that I want to leave behind, and you're one of them, being someone that I mentor, why don't you interview some of the other mentees? And she's like, yeah, I'd love to do that. She's very excited about this. And she says, who are they? And he goes, well, it's Michael Dell of Dell Computers and Red McCombs, founder of Clear Channel and the largest car dealership owner in the United States. He used to own the Spurs. He used to own the Minnesota Vikings. So we went and interviewed those 2 other individuals and got to know them and know their stories. And I was just captivated by everything that transpired from the moment the camera started rolling and hearing his story, Dr. Kosmetsky, this brilliant scientist with more of an academic track in technology. And then you have Michael Dell, who's this young kid who went to the University of Texas, didn't tell his parents what he was doing. In fact, when they came to visit him, he used to hide all the computer equipment in his bathtub so they wouldn't know what he was doing. And, just quit school and just doing all this stuff. And then he had Red Combs, who grew up in Spur, Texas, arrived with a population of 1,000, arrived at the University of Texas with a dime in his pocket, and eventually went on to become number 247 in the Forbes 400 richest people in the world. And their stories were mesmerizing. They were just these truly compelling, dynamic American stories. And they all came from very different backgrounds. And I just want to keep doing that. I really just wanted to be around that energy, that spirit of entrepreneurship, that success ratio or formula or magic, whatever it was. And so we kept on doing it. And eventually, through a course of other things that happened because of that first video, we got 25 video project with Microsoft, and I got to fly around the world doing things for them. And eventually we got that show. We pitched it to various networks, and it was called American Made. And that was our idea. That was Ingrid, our idea. and that we had kind of pictured together based on that experience we had. And they said yes, and it aired on Tuesday night, 7 p.m., right after The Apprentice. So we had a good lead in, and it was their first original programming, because basically CNBC would have programming until 4 p.m. at the market. When the market closed, they just bought stuff from other networks or from NBC. This was going to be their first one. So it was a really big deal, but it opened kind of the floodgates towards being in front of very successful founders of the most iconic brands that you can think of, such as Starbucks and Playboy and all of these different other brands and Whole Foods, that I just caught the bug. I was like, wow, this is not only inspiring, I'm learning so much. And it was, when you're a producer and a director, it's your job. If your end customer is it's CNBC, and you've got to deliver in a 1 hour television show to them, which is really hard to make a 1 hour show of one person. You may think to make it compelling, keep the viewer in, it was very challenging. And from an artistic standpoint, we did a really good job on that. Every founder we filmed called us the night after it aired, so it was the best profile ever done on them, to a person.
Wow.
And because there really wasn't a show like that had been done in a compelling, entertaining, story-driven entrepreneurship way at that time.
Yeah.
So it just it forced me to learn how to tell a story for a video on an individual founder, but I also learned so much about storytelling from the founders. And over years, 5 became 10, 10 became 20, 20 became 100. And then that's how I got to filming over 1,000 entrepreneurs in the last 18 years.
Wow.
And
incredible.
The way that kind of parlayed into storytelling for entrepreneurs, which I founded, was people kept asking me to help with them with their story. And I was like, sure. I don't know what that meant, but I just know how to make it for video. Teaching people is a whole different thing. So long story short, I'll stop there. But it was the kind of the geography of being around these very successful founders allowed me to absorb a lot of information, and other people wanted to chat with me about what I learned from them. And because I was doing video and storytelling, that became the natural progression of what I ended up teaching and learning first, and then teaching through instruction, through mentorship. Wrote a book on it. That was a 6-year project, and a variety of different elements to help impart what I learned from a storytelling perspective to help other founders.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And I was hesitant to stop you there because that was just such an incredible story. You can tell that you're very gifted in storytelling, right? And
thanks.
that it's, of course. And when you hear a good story, and anyone can attest to this, whether it's from an entrepreneur or maybe even a salesperson, right? And they're talking about success, or they're talking about, what have you, and they're good at it, and they can captivate an audience, like that garners a lot of support. So I'm with you. I think storytelling is something that is of the utmost importance for the entertainment value, for being able to convey your mission, for your vision. And I think that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in the digital age nowadays, could probably glean something from, right? So when you think about e-commerce entrepreneurs, those who are starting stores, maybe they're starting D2C companies, right? And things like that. It's probably of the utmost importance to develop a story, make sure it's good, and that, you can get it in front of an audience, right? So maybe we can dive into a little bit of, kind of what you're doing with entrepreneurs and how you're mentoring people to develop their story. Maybe you can share with the audience a few examples or just how you would go about crafting your story so that it's, ready to be distributed to several audiences and consumers.
The premise I operate from when I talk to founders about their story is, in general, most know that it's important. I mean, I don't know how, but most associate a story with entrepreneurship and the founding company. Not everybody, though. But I always try to impart upon them the wisdom that I've learned over the years, is that if you look around you, whether you're at home or in your office or even in your car, almost everything that you're looking at started with a story. If you look at 8Fig or Share, Start with Story, or Starbucks or Whole Foods, as I got to be around these very successful founders, you'd ask them this question: how did you get started? And inevitably, they would tell you the story, kind of the origin story, but then they would talk about how they use that story to do every facet of the business, at every stage of the business, for every activity that they were involved in. The story, if it was good, became an integral part of their success. Because if you think I always talk about the history of stories, about why it's such a big part of who we are as humans. Is that I talk in writing this book, I talked to anthropologists and archaeologists and sociologists and psychologists. And the archaeologists were saying, hey, we discovered evidence of storytelling in every culture on the planet, every single one. And that's because it's how we imparted knowledge. It's how we protected the clan. It's how we discovered food, the opportunity for food and shelter were all what you shared with stories, and then paring down that knowledge. And then you and I, we've been raised by stories. Our parents, there's a good chance while you're in the womb, someone read a story to you. When you were born a baby, your parents, your grandparents, your babysitter, your brothers and sisters read stories to you. So naturally, we've been groomed all the way through preschool, kindergarten, undergrad, graduate school, all of it. Mm-hmm. Stories are always around us. And what do we consume on the weekends or during the week? Books and movies, or we binge watch Game of Thrones or Ted Lasso, whatever it is. It's all stories that are always around us. So us as humans, you have to understand we are predisposed to consume and interpret the world through stories. So because of that, founders need to recognize that, because it's a very quick way to articulate your value proposition, how you're unique, why you're going to be successful, why you're the only person who can do this particular business at this very moment with the assets that you have, and why you need additional assets so you can do it better and faster and longer. Giving a plug for 8 Pig.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
What I try to do is help founders understand the importance first, so that they really know that this is something that we do every day, all day, and every brand that you've been around has used a story to launch and grow and scale their business. And you have to internalize that. Once you understand those fundamental principles, I'm like, okay, all right, you convinced me. I need a story. Where do I start? How do I do it? And when I was writing this book, this was a 6-year process. And when you end up writing a book or teaching something such as storytelling, you got to have a framework or a methodology or your own stick, right? And I'm like, okay, all right, I'm going to do that. So I started studying storytelling from Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey, or Robert McKee's got this book called Story It's This Thick. He's had like 300 Hollywood bestseller or movies that he's won awards and bestseller or most watched, all these other things. And then I went back to Plato and a bunch of other things called this history about storytelling, and I just got lost. I really did. It was just, I'm like, I don't know enough about the academics of storytelling to really teach it in that way. And then when I started asking founders, the most important people to me, because I'm teaching founder storytelling, I asked them, so what'd you learn about story? And most of them I don't know. They didn't have an answer. They didn't go study a book or Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey, all that other stuff. And so I was thinking, like, okay, if I'm writing a book, I got to have this frame. I got to come up with something. I was really struggling one day. So I just went back and I watched a lot of the footage that I had shot over the years of these various entrepreneurs, and reading transcripts or actually watching the footage, talking to other people that were kind of in my space. And it was this one clip from Howard Schultz, founder of Starbucks, that really made that moment in time where it just became crystal clear to me. And everything, the world just opened up when I discovered that moment. And I'll share with you because I think it's important for founders to know this particular secret. And it's just simple. That's what does. And so what happened was Howard Schultz was working for a kitchen equipment manufacturing company in New York City. And they happened to make espresso machines. That was just one of the things they did for kitchen equipment. And there was this company in Seattle that was buying the bejesus out of these espresso machines. And he's a sales guy for me, he's VP sales. Like any good sales, but I got to go out there, visit my client, check them out.
Of course.
Do the thing. So he goes out there, and it turns out it's a coffee bean company. And they had a place in Seattle where people would come in, and they had all the coffee beans around them. It's wonderful smelling. And they had an espresso machine so that they could make espresso for all the people out of the coffee that was there. And he became enamored with this whole idea, ended up quitting his job from New York City, moved to Seattle with his wife, and started working for this company. Yeah. And he started learning about coffee beans and espresso and all this other stuff. And they sent him to Milan, Italy, for a conference on coffee and espresso machines. It was like a coffee conference. And he was there for a couple days. And he ended up deciding, instead of taking a cab from the conference to the hotel, he just decided to walk. And while he's walking, he comes around this corner, and before he saw it, he heard it. And before he saw it, he smelt it. And all of a sudden, he comes around the corner, and there's this espresso bar. He'd never seen it before. This is the 80s or so. So
sure.
We didn't have those coffee places. We had, coffee like a truck stops or a diner or something like that. Maybe some old Mel's Diner, things like that serve coffee. We didn't have what we now know as the coffee shop. So this was this beautiful, romantic experience of smells and flavors. And he talks about this couple was having this, they're at the bar, they're just talking, it looked like this beautiful romantic. These two guys, it looked like they were arguing, but they're just talking Italian, just very loud and boisterous. And he had the baristas behind the counter just yelling out the names, the size of the drink, the things that we now venti, all the different things you hear at Starbucks. And it was just an amazing smell. He went up there, he had some, like, wow, this is just beautiful. We got to have this. I got to go tell my partners. So he flies back to his partners in Seattle. He goes, you guys, we have got to open an espresso bar in Seattle. This thing's going to take off like you've never seen. And they're like, yeah, I don't know, Howard. I don't know. But he kept egging them on. And he says they finally gave him some capital and they opened this little shop, and it's called Il Giornato. It was an espresso bar that they opened in Seattle. And it started doing really well. Of all things, right? And he's like, yeah, I'm proved it. They're going to be excited. He goes back to the partners. Okay, let's open a second. And they're like, no, partner. Howard, we're a coffee bean company. Mm-hmm. And he was very frustrated, and it was a big, button heads all this entire time. Eventually, they ended up parting ways, and he was going to take the espresso bar concept. They were going to keep the coffee bean company, but he got the name from them, and it was called Starbucks. And what he went on to say from that moment on is, every time I talked about the idea for recruiting people to come work for me, from raising capital to get the franchise or at least the multiple location elements of this, towards getting people to write about what this company was, I would share the experience that I had in Milan. Mm. And when he said that, I'm like, oh, I got it. I know exactly what it is. It's, as a founder, this is what I want you to pay attention to. As a founder, you have an experience that you had that has a meaningful relationship to your business in one way, shape, or form. Either it inspired you to launch the idea that you're doing right now, or it put you on the path that eventually led to the company that you're doing. And it's a simple experience that has a powerful relationship and meaning to what you're doing right now. That was a light bulb moment for me that I can teach any founder now how to take that experience and turn that into a compelling, dynamic story, whether it's short or long, for an investor, for the press, for their customers, anything centers around an experience that has a meaningful relationship to the business you're doing right now.
That's incredible. Yeah, it's so mind-boggling. I didn't even know the details of the full story, with Howard Schultz and Starbucks. I knew it started in Seattle. I knew it was like a sleepy little coffee shop. I had no idea that the inspiration was drawn from an espresso bar in Milan, Italy. So that's really cool. And how that moment of clarity for you just kind of switched in your brain, and you figured out the formula for how entrepreneurs can find that one moment, that defining moment in their life, right? And turn it into their business, turn it into their story, which is interesting. So is that mainly what the book kind of talks about?
It is.
And gets to that point for the entrepreneur and all that?
Yeah, what I was looking to do with this book was find a way to package the knowledge that I've gained over the years about storytelling for founders. I mean, that is my sweet spot. I can teach it to any executive at any level, but for the people I want to help the most, because that's been my world for the last 2 decades, is founders that are launching businesses or scaling or growing or whatever. So the idea for the book, Start with Story, hence every product or brand you've been around started with a story, came from that impetus. And it's a way to package all these ideas and concepts. I've got a framework around that, and it's called Sophie's Storytelling Framework for Entrepreneurs. That's what I use based on that experience, and you can kind of expand it out as much as you want. And I teach you how to chronicle your history as an individual and then eventually as a founder, to take elements of that and then build your story and then edit it, review it, and improve upon it, practice it, all the things. And this was a 6-year journey to kind of take all that information, make it as simple as possible. So the idea for every chapter is to teach you a concept, give you some examples about how to, and then also I take a very successful founder that exemplifies that particular concept, where it's reaching something on an emotional level or grabbing someone's attention or convincing people, triggering them to make a decision in your favor, whatever it is, or practicing things like that. I try to make these very successful founders, such as the founders of Starbucks and Whole Foods and Salesforce and Kendra Scott here in Austin, all these people that are really, really good at doing that particular thing for each chapter in the book.
Very, very nice. Very nice. That's amazing. And I know we talked a lot about Howard Schultz's story in Milan, Italy, and how that was like a defining moment. I'd love to hear, in your arsenal of other entrepreneurs that you've met or that you know of, like what are some other compelling stories that you could share right now, or that we could go research on our own. I'd love to just hear like what are some other examples that you think are exemplary stories of entrepreneurs that really, that they can lean on and have driven their business to where they are today.
Absolutely. There's a couple I'll share with, the ones I'll share are also on my website, so you can kind of see some blogs about them. I talk about them quite a bit in the book as well. Scott Harrison's, the founder of Charity Water, is an unbelievably just effervescent person, right? And he exemplifies the concept of just being authenticity.
Yeah.
Because when you hear Scott talk about how Charity Water was born, why he did it, his background, he talks about, he used to be into drugs and alcoholic and just to be living kind of this soulless lifestyle. And it was a moment in time where he discovered that there's got to be something more, that he kind of came up with the idea for Charity Water through a series of events. But what I really love about Scott Harrison's story with Charity Water is that he uses vulnerability and speaking from a place of authenticity all the time to paint a picture of who he's trying to help, why they need our help. And every money that you donate to Charity Water goes 100% to drilling wells in Africa or South America or Asia. None of it goes to the operations. He found some angels to just take care of it in perpetuity. So 100% of your money goes there. And he explains, I'm doing this because I got to see how bad individuals and communities and villages, when they don't have access to clean drinking water, this is what happens to them. They get cleft lips, they get diseases. The simplest things can cause them to die that we don't ever deal with here in the U.S. So he uses he rode the Red Cross ship. The name escapes me right now. It's basically a ship that goes around the Horn of Africa and other places, and it's a mercy ship.
Okay.
And anyone can come and do whatever they need. They just dock in a port, and everyone comes to port. And he was a photographer for that, and that's where he discovered why drinking water is so important and how that was the inspiration for Charity Water. But then he takes it steps further. He goes, I was leading the soul life, and I discovered my soul by doing this. And then he shares these photos and videos that you're like, oh my God, I got to help these people. And then he says, but this other inspirational talk, and he kind of gives you a hook, leans you in with, we need to make this difference. We have to do something for these people. But he's also used social media and storytelling to showcase when a well gets drilled in Africa, and the money you donated, whether it was $10, $100, $10,000, doesn't matter. You get to watch it being drilled live, and you get to watch the village where it's being drilled at. They start celebrating when the water comes out. It's this beautiful moment of ecstasy because there's this clean drinking water,
Yeah.
and what their lives used to be. So I really liken him to teach you how to reach people on an emotional level, be authentic, be vulnerable, because that's how you connect with people. At the end of the day, I always preach that the reason I share a story with you is I need to reach you on an emotional level, so that you can relate to what I'm doing, and hopefully you're inspired to support me in one way, shape, or form, or make a decision that's going to help me get money, get me press, buy from me, whatever it is. I need to reach you on that emotional level. Authenticity and being vulnerable is one of the most powerful ways that there is to do that.
I would agree with that statement wholeheartedly. That's something that, I learned early on, in my career, which is still pretty nascent to the whole working life, to be honest, but something I learned by listening to podcasts like Gary Vee's, right?
Yep.
And others is that why are people so drawn to you? It's like, why are you this big success? What makes you tick? It's like, I'm just authentic. Like I lay it all out there.
Yep.
This is me. This is utterly who I am. Take it or leave it. And a lot of people take it. And he's another example.
He's in the book too. I filmed him.
Oh, no way.
He's awesome. And
that's awesome.
Because I remember when he started, I was checking him out on YouTube, and I came across this video, and this guy in a basement with this
wine library and all that.
old school video camera type thing. It's terrible lighting, terrible sound. As a video production guy, I'm like, oh my God, I wanted to vomit at that. But it didn't matter. He had a spittoon with the Jets logo on it, and he's talking about wine. And this is a great wine, blah, 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 blah. And you know how he is. He's like, he just kind of vomits stuff out all the time.
Oh, yeah.
But it was raw, unfiltered. You could tell that's who this guy was. And he took this snobbish kind of wine, Napa Valley thing and made it approachable for anybody that just wanted to learn about wine and, buy some wine at the liquor store, at the convenience store, whatever. He's like, look, this is what you don't need to spend $100. This $20 bottle of wine that was at his dad's liquor store, he'd talk about those things, but he's another person, very authentic. He's very raw and unfiltered because inevitably, individuals and founders especially, we want to put on this aura that we're probably better than we are, or we're doing better than we are. We don't want people to see our weaknesses. We don't want people to see areas that we're not strong in, as another way to say that. But the reality is, people gravitate towards real people, and you can see through inauthentic people pretty quickly. You may not know it, but you can kind of feel it, even if you don't know it. So authenticity is a power that we have, and by sharing mistakes, I'm showing you, hey, I made that mistake. I'm not going to make it again. Or I learned some hard lessons from the experiences I went through in my life, and that has that's steeled me. It has given me fortitude. It's given me confidence that I know I can get through that I know that I can figure out a way to get around it, over it, whatever. And when you're talking to investors or people, and here's another thing too, people, there's another woman in my book, and that's also on my website. Her name's Carly Roney. She's the founder of The Knot.
Okay.
And quickly, her story was she had went to art school in New York, and there were her and her future husband, two other people, were sitting in a diner in New York City. And this is the internet, which is taking off. They're trying to come up with an idea that centered around the internet. And they asked Carly, who had just gotten married to the other person at the table, says, hey, Carly, why don't we do something around newlyweds and weddings and all this stuff? She goes, oh, hell no. My wedding day was the worst day of my life.
Wow.
That's what she said. And it was because she got married. She only had 7 weeks to plan. Ended up landed on the hottest day in New York in history at that time. And she was marrying an Asian, and there wasn't a mixed racial wedding guidelines in there. And she didn't have enough money for what she wanted to do. And so it was this terrible experience that she wanted to forget. And so they went around like, okay, we'll find something else. So she goes back a day or two later, and she talks to them when they come around to that diner again. She goes, you know what? I want to make sure that future brides-to-be don't have the same miserable experience that I did. And she made a 180. She shared everything that went wrong with her wedding so that she could help the future generation of brides not make the same mistakes. And if you want to relate to a woman about to get married, you tell them all the things to avoid. Like literally, I grew up with 4 sisters. I know this very well. Women love authenticity when you're trying to help them avoid mistakes or do different things. So it's this other power of being vulnerable, of being authentic, and sharing an experience that you had that has a meaningful relationship to the business that you're doing right now. It all goes back to that can help other people, that can inspire them. And the press loves car wrecks. They just love terrible stories.
They do.
Because then they can write about how they overcame that battle. Humans, we love car wrecks. We're always staring at it. That's why we rubberneck when we go. We like that. We're driven to look for the bad things. Mm-hmm. So if you can take a bad story, turn it into essentially an asset for you, and then it becomes, you're not only, and it just kind of feels good when you're authentic. You know how to, when you don't tell the truth, maybe you fib a little bit or didn't tell someone, you kind of feel a little, it's the opposite. You know, you're feeling like, I was really vulnerable. But afterwards, you know what? This is who I am. Yeah. This is what you're getting. And that's how it should be. That's who you want to be with.
That's a good point. And that's definitely something that I like to live by. You know, it's a good philosophy. The more authentic you can be, the more honest you are, good things are going to come. It's just the way it is. So now would be a good point to rewind and kind of write all that down, because that was some really, really good stuff. Yeah, that's fantastic. I think, one thing I'd like to learn a little bit more about is, when you were at some of these accelerators, right? Maybe prior to the book, prior to the storytelling, or maybe it was in conjunction with that. But for example, at SKU, right? When you would meet new entrepreneurs there, maybe they were fledgling entrepreneurs trying to, build up their business and things like that. What were some common challenges that you saw, in the groups of the cohorts or what have you, that you think, could be solved pretty simply or what have you, but like what were some common like issues you'd see entrepreneurs would have, and do you have some tips for maybe overcoming those and how they could approach those differently from a new light?
Yeah, there's definitely 3 things I learned in being involved with probably 4 different accelerators over time. Anderson Horowitz is being another one, in addition to SKU and the Founder Institute and Empowering and Building Women. So 3 mistakes that these founders make typically in the early stages. Number 1, their story's too long. Number 2, they don't get the attention of the audience right away. You've got a very when it relates to also being too long, but also you've got to like hook them right away, or their mind's going to start wandering.
Yeah.
And number 3, it has to relate to them in some way. You've got to make sure that your story is going to connect with that individual in the sphere of things that they care about. Those 3 are some of the 3 biggest mistakes that I see founders make when they go into these accelerators or incubators. Because, and one of the biggest reasons that we're so passionate about what we're doing. We're living in our own bubble. We think everybody knows why we're doing this, who we're going to sell to, why people are going to care, why I'm the best person to do this. And we get lost on our own bubbles. And it's understandable, but you have to see it from the perspective of the audience that you're in front of. So when you're at an accelerator, you're seeing, like typically at SKU, we had 100 to 200 applications just to get in. And then once you get in, you've got 7, and you watch them back to back 7 in a row. Same thing with Anderson Horowitz or the Founder Institute. You're just seeing a lot of pitches to go back to back to back. And think of it this way: you need to find a way to connect with your audience quickly in a way that relates to them and doesn't take too long to tell all of it.
Okay.
So those things can make or break the difference between whether you get invited into the accelerator, whether you get invited to the next stage of the contest that maybe you're using the accelerator to get into, or just connecting with investors or partners or recruit people. If you don't do those 3 things, you're definitely in a world of hurt. So I always tell people is that the first impressions are everything. And there are studies that prove if you don't make a great first impression, whether you're meeting someone for the first time, but especially when you're pitching, unfortunately, they're going to associate that first impression with you, of you, and about you for the rest of the time they see you and meet you and talk about you going forward. So it's really important to focus in on what is that opening line. Because there's an old writing adage. The objective of the first line is to get you to read the second line. The objective of the second line is to get you to read the third line. And on and on and on. So you really got to open strong and then come back with a second one. Jab, 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 right hook, all those type of things, right? You want to do these things that are connect with them, make them want more, make them connect with you and understand why they should care.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like storytelling is so woven into marketing, right? And that formula for like a good marketing hook, right? Jab, 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 right hook. As you put it, and as Gary Vee puts it, it's so important to really capture the audience in the right way by telling the story effectively. So that's a really interesting point.
I'll share one other piece of advice that I learned very early on is that no one cares about your story. Very difficult thing to get over. You just got to like get over that and figure that out. And I remember because my friend who helped me with the book, his name is Tucker Max. And I was working on my book. I've been a couple years into it, and I'm trying to write my opus, but I put all of the information that I had gained over those years and decades about storytelling and entrepreneurship into one book. And he reads, and it starts working my book. He starts ripping it apart, and he goes, "Lyn, nobody cares about your book. All they care about your book is what it can do for them." And I knew that, but that was a light bulb moment when he said it to me after I'd poured my heart and soul in this. Like, you know what? If it's this big, thick thing that doesn't relate to anybody, nobody has time to read it. No one's going to care. So once I took the emotion out of it and figured out, okay, let me package something that they will care about, how it's going to help them. And that's how you got to think as a founder. What's the story I can share about my pitch, my opportunity, the idea, the concept, the value proposition, that someone will care in such a way that they want to help me, support me, or make a decision in my favor?
Yeah, it's kind of like selling the feeling, right? You know, like, I don't know if you've ever read that book, but it's just an adage in sales and marketing. It's like, don't sell the outcome. Sell the feeling that they're going to receive from that outcome. What's it going to do for them? Make them successful, impress their friends, make them a lot of money. That's what it reminded me of, and it's super interesting. Where can listeners find the book? Where can they buy it?
You can buy that on Amazon. That's the Lyn Graft Start with Story. That's the easiest way to find the book.
Awesome. Just so everyone gets it. It's going to be in the show notes as well, but Start with Story, Lyn Graft. Find it on Amazon as well. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit, but I I'd like to switch gears over to Share Snacks.
Yeah.
Maybe we could talk a little bit more about the Share Snacks story.
Yeah.
Kind of how you got involved and what you're doing for them right now.
You bet.
Yeah.
2018 or so, maybe 2019, I was speaking at an event called the Paleo Effects Conference. And this was a health and wellness event. I just got done speaking and I had some books with me because my book had just come out right at the same time. And I'm leaving the conference the afternoon, hadn't really eaten. You know, conferences, you don't have really time to eat. I'm like, I'm going to go eat somewhere right afterwards. And I see this guy in the corner and I'm like, oh, he's got some food. So I made a beeline for it and I walked up to him and I said, hey, I'm Lyn Graft, blah, blah, blah. And I said, hey, I'll swap you my book for some trail mix. So we ended up just kind of talking. He asked about the book and I started asking about trail mix and he was talking a little bit about this and I asked him, so tell me how I got this going. And he goes, oh, well, I'm glad you asked. And he just goes off and he starts, his name is Peter Rushford and we've become really good friends. And Peter's a great guy, just has these salt of the earth individual from Vermont, grew up with 9 siblings and grew up outdoors. And he talks about his journey always being outdoors and how he made a decision to become a professional skier during high school in a conversation with his dad and did that for a number of years, then started a ski circus, and then he got into selling outdoor equipment through that process. And he spent 37 years in the outdoor space, and that was kind of the story that he was telling me. And I taught skiing for 4 years. I loved it, so we immediately connected on that. I'm outdoors all the time, trail running, all that. We just had this great, almost 2-hour conversation. And while he's talking with me, I'm eating this trail mix, and I'm going, man, this is good. And I'm saying it to myself, and he kept talking. I'm like, man, this is really good. About the third time, I'm like, Peter, what the hell's in this thing? This is the best trail mix I've ever had. And he goes, oh, I'm glad you've asked. And he goes out and talks about, well, I spent, he spent 3 years, 52 iterations, 900 hours to get the exact right 9 ingredients to go in the product. And then he spent another year sourcing all the ingredients to make sure that it had the best coconut comes from Sri Lanka. The blueberries that come from Washington, the cherries come from Michigan, the pecans come from Texas, and on and on and on, from the almonds, the cashews, and the pistachios. They were the best of the best from around the world. And they were all from small family-owned organic farmers. So not only did it have this unbelievably great taste, we call it impossibly good, it was ridiculously healthy. And then he started going into, I also wanted to make kind of some packaging that was an paid homage to my years in the outdoor space, because I worked with all these great brands such as UGG and Varney and Royal Robbins and just a lot of the outdoor brands he'd been with over the years, and how so many of them cared, Keen being another one of them, cared about the environment and sustainability. I wanted to make a brand that was almost a vehicle for being sustainable and carry this idea of conservation and protecting the earth through the vehicle. So he ended up working really hard at coming up with packaging that was plastic free. And I wasn't aware at the time, but he made this statement to me. He goes, yeah, if you go into Whole Foods right now, most of the products in there are single-use plastic. And in my head, I'm like, come on, this is Whole Foods. This is the flagship store. They're headquartered in Austin. And I filmed John Mackey. He really cares about the environment. So I went the next week, a couple days later, and I walked the aisles of Whole Foods. And I got to tell you, Sam, it was depressing. It was really depressing just to see this pinnacle of healthy eating in Whole Foods. They introduced the organic kind of mantra of healthy eating to all of us, and their packaging was horrendous. We're talking like 97% of it. And to give you a level of detail, Peter went and did this. There are, on our aisle where our trail mix is in the flagship store, there are 400 SKUs. We have 2. We have a bag and we have this tube that you're looking at.
Sure.
2 of the 400 SKUs. If Whole Foods went in there tomorrow and says, okay, we're going to take all of the plastic single-use product SKUs off that aisle, guess how many would be left?
How many?
2. Hours.
Yeah.
And it just reinforced this, God, this is terrible. This flagship store of a pinnacle of healthy eating has plastic single-use packaging in all their products. And I'm not just talking snacks. I'm talking everything. And it's gotten better, but not by a whole lot. So it was that mission that he had this ethos to make sure we're an earth-first company. And I ended up working with him, helping with his story. Peter's long-winded. We both are a little bit, but I was helping to help him really get the story kind of nailed down, focus on taking it quickly, on brand, articulating the value proposition, make it compelling, and taking a lot of information, have multiple versions. So I spent a lot of time working as a consultant. Then over time, I approached him. I said, I don't want to. I watched these other brands in the CPG space blow up in a good way in front of me, take off here in Austin. And I filmed a lot of their founders. And I was like, I don't want to miss this one. So we made a deal. Now I'm an equity partner in the deal. So we both own the company. And I became the chief story officer because that's what I really started helping with.
Of course.
But I see the mission now being the chief story officer being this a vessel to communicate our value proposition, our Earth First ethos, and why we believe we're the most sustainable snack brand on the planet. Because of all the things that we're doing that speak to how you and I as individuals can make a purchase decision that will support the Earth in such a way that we do no harm. In fact, we're helping the Earth by doing this. And the way that it works is, as I was mentioning, everything is single-use plastic, and they have these disposable bags. And we decided to come up with this tube that is refillable. So the ink, the glue, and the paper is all plant-based. So this is compostable. So you put it in the ground, it'll turn to dirt in a matter of months. The idea was we made this refillable up to a year. So what we want you to do is buy this tube just once, but then use our bulk packaging and refill it. And the bulk packaging is all compostable in a home composter within 4 months. So the idea is, just like Patagonia, they want you to buy their items just once, keep it forever. We want you to buy this tube, keep it for a year, and then refill it with our bulk packaging, compost that so you have zero waste snacking.
Wow.
So the idea was, and here's an example how I took a lot of what I just talked about and made something simple for us. Share snacks, good for your taste buds, good for your body, and good for the planet.
Yeah.
So there's an example of taking a lot of elements that make us unique, that speak to our value proposition and our mission and ethos, turning into something quick and I can articulate in a variety of different ways without ever saying we're the best. So let me dovetail into that as give your viewers an example of what I mean by that. We don't say we're the best tasting trail mix out there. We let our customers do that for us. But the way I articulate taste, because you really can't compete on taste, it really doesn't mean anything. Because so many brands are out there that kind of say that, it becomes just kind of whatever. But we do say we spent 3 years, 52 iterations on the recipes, 900 hours to come up with the exact right 9 ingredients to make sure it's got this symphony of flavors in your mouth.
Yeah.
All that work together. That's why it took so long. And then we spent another year, so that speaks to good for your taste buds.
Of course.
Then we spent another year sourcing the ingredients to make sure that it comes from only small family-owned organic farmers, so it's responsibly sourced, gluten-free, grain-free, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's GMO-free, paleo, vegan. It's got all the accoutrements of being ridiculously healthy without even saying it's healthy. I'm describing kind of the process, the evolution that we went through to create the product, to make sure it was responsibly sourced, and then I say that we're incredibly sustainable by saying we're plastic free. We've got this refillable tube. We donate 20% of our net profits to the Conservation Alliance. We're a member of 1% for the Planet. We're climate neutral certified. We just got certified organic by the USDA, and now we've applied to be a B Corp. So I'm able to articulate our value proposition by describing the journey that we've gone through storytelling in such a way that I'm not necessarily bragging. I'm just talking about what we did and this consummate attention to detail at every step of the way so that you know that it's not going to suck when it comes to taste, all right? Because we spent a lot of time making sure it tastes good. It's not going to be unhealthy for you because it's organic, GMO-free, gluten-free, grain-free, all notified, and it's certified organic. And we're plastic-free. You can certify it. It says on the bottom compostable, other bags, everything else like that. And then, you can speak to on our website how we're members of these organizations being climate neutral. So it's a way that instead of just kind of talking we're the best at something, it's a way for founders to take a story, an element about what you've done, that journey to get there, to articulate who you are, why you did it, how you're unique and different, and why you're going to win.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're very lucky to have you as a storyteller.
Thanks, man.
Of course. This is that was so interesting to hear more about kind of the origin of it and how you guys met and what you're doing to make, not just for a better ecosystem for us all, but a better planet for us all. So that's That's really spectacular. And I just love the idea that this is refillable. You can buy the packaging, which is also compostable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're helping the earth on many different levels. I feel like the world needs more companies like this, literally. So that's...
And also, one thing I'll say about that, Sam, is that it was depressing, literally, for me as an individual who'd been around the CBG space, and I just wasn't aware of how bad the situation was. And I'd walked the aisles at Whole Foods, and I've done it at other stores ever since. And it's just ubiquitous.
Yeah.
It's how we as consumers expect everything single-use packaging.
Yeah.
We eat it, we open it, we throw it away.
Yeah.
That's just who we are as individuals, especially in America. Not all countries, but especially in America. So one of our goals is, we want to inspire the next generation of consumer packaged goods founders to follow our lead. We have to be successful in this very conservation-minded, sustainably focused, earth-first ethos. And if we can do it, so can you. So we share the vendors where we get our packaging from. We're very transparent about how we did it, why we're doing it, who we got it from, so that this next generation can start out with plastic-free packaging. It's more expensive, takes more work, it's longer, harder, takes more money, but the prices are coming down.
Yeah.
They're more accessible. There's more vendors. We keep that train going, and we want to be an iconic brand that did it right in the same way that Patagonia inspires us. We want to inspire other food brands to be like we are, like Shār.
Absolutely. And I have a hunch that you're doing a very good job at that. What, out of curiosity, what's the origin behind the name Shār Snacks?
That's a little long story. I don't know how much time we have, but
we'd love to hear it.
Okay. It's kind of a funny story.
Okay. I'm into it. I like funny stories.
So this is before I came on board. Peter was, he's a big fan of outdoor individuals and influencers, and there's two people that were going to be speaking at South by Southwest. One was Jimmy Chin. He's a famous photographer. He filmed the movie Free Solo.
Oh yeah. Yes. He also has a documentary on Masterclass that I watched.
Yes, actually, and then in photography. And then also he did. Alex Honnold was going to be there. Alex Honnold was the person who filmed. So they were speaking at South by Southwest, and Peter had met them. And it's like, oh my God, I go to South by. I got to see them speak. Got to meet them. I got to give them some of our product, right? So he decided after he met them, he's going to try. I think he's going to go back the next day. So he goes to this paper place right across from Whole Foods downtown, and he wanted some nice letterhead and put it in this nice gift wrapping thing. And he walks into this paper store and talks to the retail woman that helps him, and she explains everything that's going on. He likes to tell stories, so he explains everything to her. So she walks him around the store, gets everything that he needs, and she kind of learns all the story, and this is like, wow, this is amazing. I hope it goes well. And she asks him, what's it called? And he goes, yeah, well, I'm still working on the name, but I'm just going to go with the one that I formed the LLC under. And she goes, what's that? And he says, Pete's Nuts. And she's like, that's a horrible name. You can't use that. And he goes, yeah, I know. No, she goes, no, you don't understand. You can't use that name. You just alienated half the population because women don't want to buy Pete's Nuts. Let me tell you right now. And it's just a terrible name. And she's like, yeah, I know. So he ends up leaving the store, and he goes back to his condo that was very close to the Whole Foods downtown. And he has kind of a sleepless night because of that, because the next day he was going to take it to him. And he wakes up his fiance, Taylor, at 5 in the morning or 4 in the morning. He goes, Taylor, this is what happened. I can't go with this name. And she's like, what? Huh? So she gets up. Yeah, Taylor's wicked smart. So they basically sit there and she just asks him questions like, okay. And he'd already hired a firm and had gone through 1,200 names that he didn't like. So that's why he was going with Pete's Nuts.
Wow.
He couldn't find one.
Oh my gosh.
So through this process of Taylor asking him questions about the name, and she asks him, a series of questions, right? And she asks him, so, you've worked in the outdoor space for 37 years. What did you love about that kind of led you here? And he goes, I love being around these great brands, just Keen and UGG and Vibram and Barney and Old Sunglass Company. And he goes, I love sharing the stories of those brands. And it was like, whoa, that's kind of cool, sharing. So I looked at Shār, can't trademark Shār, and started looking at the word Shār and everything else, and ended up deciding, Shār, if we spell it phonetically, we can trademark the name and we can own that particular URL. And that's how it was birthed, was from that paper retail one telling your name is terrible.
Yeah.
And he ended up working with his fiance to come up with something that means for And it's also who we are as a brand. We're about sharing stories, about sharing great product, about sharing the things that have made us successful so that you can be successful. And sharing is caring, as you're taught on the kindergarten playground when you're first born. And sharing is one of the oldest activities known to humankind.
Absolutely.
And it's born from those roots.
Kind of like storytelling.
Yep, very much so in that way. So it's born in those roots with a funny story about Pete's Nuts.
How hilarious is that? From Pete's Nuts to Share Snacks. And it's also crazy that he went through 1,200 names before that to get to Share Snacks. That's insane. That's absolutely wonderful. Well, I love it. I think it's a fantastic brand. I can't wait to try some. And for anyone who wants to buy some of their own, they can find you in Whole Foods, but also at sharesnacks.com, handcrafted in Austin, Texas.
And it's SHAR, no E, snacks. And it's share like the bear that's on our logo. That's how you remember to say it. Share.
Well, that's terrific. Lyn, I think this has been a wonderful conversation. I loved learning about your story and the book and Share Snacks. I'd like to close it out. I know you mentioned that you're an outdoorsman. You like to go trail running.
Yeah.
Right? You have other activities potentially. But you did mention one thing that I'd like to hear more about, which is honking at cows on road trips. Maybe we can dive into that a little bit. It's not something that I've done.
Okay.
But I'd like to hear, what's so great about it.
I've been doing road trips since I was a young kid. My mom used to drive us from New Mexico. My parents, we would drive in a station wagon, 7 of my family. I have 4 sisters, Cindy, Lynn, and Minnie, Wendy. And we would travel in a station wagon 2 days straight, go to Michigan, and drive back either for winter or for the summer. We didn't have much money, but it was just family love, so we were always telling stories. And so I've been road tripping for a long time. And then when I became a ski instructor, I lived in my car when I wasn't teaching skiing for 2 years. So I was constantly road tripping in a Subaru of all things. And I actually connected with a lot of folks and friends while I was traveling. I go stay with them. And one of my buddies, who's my little brother in fraternity, his name is Willie Melfi.
Nice.
And Willie is just a great storyteller as well. He had this huge station wagon. He used to drive everywhere. And we would go everywhere road tripping that beast. And he and I would sit there. And I'll give him credit. He's the one who really taught me about this. But you'd be driving along this country road in Wyoming or eastern Washington or even New Mexico. And you see just kind of cows just sitting there. And then so he's like, watch this, wait. And we're driving up to him doing 40, 50, 60 miles an hour, and you'd honk. And what's so funny about it is, the cows would honk at where the noise came from, not where the car was by the time you got to where they're at. So if you're over there and the cows are over there, and the cows are instead of looking at where you are, they kind of look where you were. They go, they'd say nothing, and they go right back down. And we would just laugh. I mean, it was so funny just to see them honk at where we were instead of where we are. And we just do it again. We would do that. It never ceases to entertain me. I know it's simplicity at its best, but I love the joy of that little childlike just opportunity to find joy in every moment.
We need more of that, right? It's therapeutic, and it's the little things that really make us happy.
It is. And little things make great stories. You can find good.
As you can tell, a lot of those pivotal moments from some of those entrepreneurs were small things. Somebody at the paper shop saying, you can't name it that. It turned into the wonderful brand that Share Snacks
awesome.
Is. So that's spectacular. And before I forget, I know we said we're going to close it out, but one more thing. You have your coaching program, right? Selling with entrepreneur, remind me the name.
So
selling for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, basically, I'm in the process of building a platform called Storytelling for Entrepreneurs. And the book was kind of the first, launching point for that. And now I've come up with a course called Create, and it's how to create a story from scratch. That's what it stands for. And it's the concepts in the book that have been packaged into, a 10-module course. And you can find it at storytellingforentrepreneurs.com/Lyn_Graft. If you can put that in the show notes so people don't have to remember that.
Absolutely.
And the idea is to help any founder that needs help with their story. And I'm typically targeting first-time founders or founders that, they know they have a story or they need to work on their story. That's the target audience. It's someone that wants to go from scratch, create your story from scratch, and learn how to create a compelling, dynamic story and how to have different versions of your story, different links of your story for different audiences. That's the goal.
Awesome. And for anyone who's interested in crafting their story and improving it, turning it into, a very woven part of their brand, you have to chat with Lyn. You have to go check it out and and learn from him, because, like I said earlier, a gifted storyteller who has done this many times, worked with plenty of entrepreneurs, and it's been a real pleasure having you on here. This has been a lot of fun, and we really appreciate it. I'm sure we'll do it again in the future at some point. We can talk about, the journey and the story from here.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, Sam, and thanks for 8Fig to supporting the entrepreneur community in general, just because founders need access to capital. Let's get a plug for them, and there's a variety of different ways I've learned over the years to access capital. Not just there's debt, there's equities, other instruments. So it's super important to have those multiple facets and tools in your toolbox to help you reach different levels of success, grow, and scale your company. So thanks for what you guys are doing.
Of course, and thank you for those kind words. I like to end the in-person episodes with shouting "Sell yeah" into the camera.
Okay,
it's kind of our thing. So on the count of 3, we're gonna do a fist and yell "Sell yeah." Does that sound good?
I can do that.
All right, so 3, 2, 1. Sell yeah.